Create Academy, just still getting going. Why don't we do a quick intro and tell me who you are and what you're doing here in Sarasota.
Well, my name is Joe Donaldson. I actually originally grew up in Sarasota. I moved away in 2006 after high school, and then from there my wife and I went on to Chicago and New York City and Los Angeles. And in 2016, so after about 10 years of being away, an opportunity to teach at Ringling opened up, and that was kind of the magnet or the catalyst that brought us back here. It was kind of unexpected, but so far it's been 2 years now, and it's been pretty wonderful.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your time in LA and New York and these various places, studio gigs, doing design, animation.
It's kind of funny. It's been like, I jokingly, I guess it's not a joke, I've literally worn probably every hat imaginable in the industry, so to speak. So when I was still in Florida, my first job was at an ABC news station, and that was before I even knew what any of this stuff really was. I didn't even know what motion design was. I just had came from a background of making BMX and skate video edits with my friends, and I was the guy with the camera who would put the edits together. And then very luckily for me, a guy made a very risky decision and gave me an opportunity to work at an ABC news station. And I kind of taught myself on the job everything about cameras and motion design, and I did that for a few years. I dropped out of college to do that. So I did that for I think going on right at 3 years, and that was kind of that then became the catalyst that made me realize I wanted to do something in this space, but I didn't want it to be in broadcast news, and that was the catalyst for me to go back to school. And that was what took my wife and I to Chicago. I went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, where I studied visual communications, and that was kind of the beginning of, I guess, working professionally, quote unquote. So I did that for a number of years in Chicago, and then went from there directly to Digital Kitchen. And then after a number of years in Chicago, went over to New York, which was predominantly freelance. So when I was in Chicago, it was like an internship that turned into permalance. And then when I went to New York, it was mainly freelance work. And then I got picked up by Not to Scale, and I was on their roster as a worldwide represented director. I did that for a few years, but then which was great. We can go really into detail on that kind of stuff. But then when my wife and I realized we had our daughter on the way, the peaks and valleys of being a rep director were a little intimidating, and that's when my friends at Buck gave me a position in the LA office. So then I went from New York to LA.
Get some of that good weather.
For a full-time job, and then did that. So that was my staff, full-time, leadership kind of job there. Until present day, and obviously each one of those chapters is a huge kind of conversation. So I'm trying to do a cursory pass at all of it. And then again now down here, working at Ringling, running motionographer and or the content side of motionographer, I should say. And then I just started Holdframe.
Let's talk a little bit about Holdframe. It's brand new, launched, got a really good response when you put it out. You made a really great video. You have these fantastic artists. Tell me where the idea came from, and then just bring us up to speed on the journey of putting it together. How long did it take, that kind of thing?
Well, it's kind of been, it was a very long process, but then when I decided to actually do it, it turned out to be really quick. So one of the things I wrote about in the original article that I wrote, launching the idea, was this experience I had working with Stephen Kelleher at Buck, New York. And it was, it was this really kind of simple thing where I was just looking through his files, and there's just this thing, this kind of aha moment that I saw looking at his files that I would have never thought of a solution like that ever. So just having the privilege of not only him enabling me to look at his files and kind of ask questions, but then just being able to see how other people solve problems, that one instance really changed my perspective on how I worked. And that was kind of, I guess, the genesis or the beginning of the idea of Holdframe. Was when you're working in-house with people, especially at a place like Buck or wherever, you're working with the most talented people in the world, and they all are solving things differently. There's no set standards on how to do anything. So you're just getting bombarded by all this information of how to do things, where then on the flip side of that, my experience working remotely is very isolating. You're like alone and you have none of that. So kind of the idea for Holdframe was to see if, as an experiment, if I could combine the benefits that you get of working with people, but remotely, by creating this resource where people can support artists they believe in or they respect or they just like their work, and then also kind of pick through the files and learn from it as well. And I've kind of like, up to this point, it's kind of just been like a very, very big experiment, because it was like nothing like this actually exists. I mean, I think there was a company called Craft who they used to do something slightly similar, but it wasn't like community centered, and it was a much bigger scale. They're like a much more real business than I am with Holdframe. But so like this idea of just like open sourcing or file sharing kind of thing was something I didn't see being done, and I just figured I'd try it out. So.
Let's talk a little design education. You're teaching at one of the world's great art and design schools just up the road here. You've been there for...
this is my second year.
This will be your second year. Give me a sense of like what the ethos of the motion design department is. Like if that can be summarized of, I'm a student, I want to come to the motion design department. What is it you want for me as a student coming into that environment?
It's tough to summarize it, because like I imagine something you run into as well is motion design is like everything. So trying to condense it into like a 4-year program with prerequisites and things like that, like it's very difficult, because there's so many different tracks that people can go, whether they want to be a generalist or a specialist, or they want to be an art director, or just do storyboards or design.
That's something within the department you guys make accommodation for? Like if someone's like, I just want to be a storyboard artist, you'll change the path?
They're hoping to do something, they're hoping to implement tracks, but obviously like within the bureaucracy of like an institution and how that works, it depends on how many people are interested in that kind of track, the faculty, all kinds of things like that. I think one of the big picture goals, and obviously I can't speak to like what Ringling's plans are for the future, but I think one of the goals would be to do something where there are tracks. So if you want to go like the more CG compositing, 3D generalist route, there's a track that you can go there. If you want to go the more 2D illustrative track, there's a track you can go there. I think SCAD does something along those lines. I don't know, but I think that will likely be in the future, but again, it depends on need and possibility. So I think the general...
but you want to develop their artistic abilities, their technical abilities.
The general ethos or like kind of values of the department is really just to expose kids to everything. So everyone that comes through, they all take everything from stop motion classes to compositing classes to design and storyboarding, all the way up through some like entry level like VFX kind of high-end compositing stuff, and then like animation and everything all interspersed. So right now it's kind of all of the different facets of motion design are kind of fit into the current structure. And then for students that want to specialize, there aren't like industry like made paths or programs for that, but we have students that want to make their focus like stop motion, and usually most instructors will do what they can to accommodate. So one of the students that I've had him for I think 3 semesters now. He's definitely gonna like his dream job is Leica, going somewhere like that, which isn't motion design in its traditional definition.
Or like character animation almost.
But like kind of like all stop motion and fabrication and stuff. So usually like with each project, I, at least personally as I guess a professor, I try to keep the projects, I try to have them so they have like a through line that everyone's going to learn from, and like there's something that's not subjective, that it's like this is something you need to learn how to do, and then how they skin it or how they approach it, that's where it can be subjective based on their own interests. But again, I'm no formally trained teacher. It's just an experience that I've been in, and I've been thoroughly enjoying. So.
What are the biggest struggles for young motion designers, coming in? Is it there's an obstacle of the technical, or they need to learn design before they can really put things together? What do you see as a struggle from your students?
Well, I don't know if it's just student-based. I would say it's kind of everyone deals with this. It's mainly how nebulous motion design is or can be.
Putting a definition on it's very difficult.
Because it's like there's people out there that only make gifts for a living. And like 10 years ago, you would never, if 10 years ago you would have told anyone that there'll be people making, I'm assuming like 6-figure incomes and supporting families off of making gifts, like people have said you were crazy. So even in just the past 10 years, there's so many different facets or avenues that kind of open up. So I think one of the things that a lot of people struggle with, both as like a young student, but then even as a professional, is how to define what area of motion design you want to focus on. Because there are generalists that literally are great at everything, but those are few and far between. So it's like, what is it that interests you? So you kind of have to make that decision based on, I guess, what the market needs, like what's employable, but then also what you're passionate about. And it's kind of always a balancing act.
What about the professional development side? What does Ringling do to help students understand? I mean, I assume you have classes on like, here's what's in the economy right now, here are what the jobs look like. I imagine there's a lot of students really interested to know, like, what do I do with these skills? Well,
I always say, like, and obviously not to like appear like a company man, like one of the things that Ringling does really well, and to a fault depending on your perspective, is they're really, really good at like job placement and like the business side of things. I think in the 2 years that I've been here, 100% of our graduating classes had a job in less than 3 months of graduation. And now, like, what that job is there's a spectrum there, but they really place an emphasis on that. I think a lot of that is just the pressures of being a big accredited institution that's expensive. So they definitely put a lot of pressure, not pressure, but they put a lot of emphasis on what you're going to do with the skill. So like in my classes, I'm kind of the antithesis of that. I'm like, you're going to go make ads for the rest of your life. Fuck making ads in the classroom. We're just going to make weird stuff. Like I'm kind of more on the art for art's sake kind of side of the spectrum. But outside of my class, there's so much where like they're like within real building a website. The career services department is like in fifth gear all the time, like bringing people in. They do professional week, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a balance, because for me, like, and again, like personally, I like the school that I went to, SAIC, like in my time there, like no one ever once even, like if you mentioned like getting a job or professionalism, like you were like a sinner. Like you would be banished. It was like art school for the sake of art school. Like it's like, it was very like
stigma attached
like it was very like art for art's sake. And even like I was in the visual communications department, which is like their name for graphic design. And like we never talked about getting jobs. It was only like design as an art form and design as like function. And like, whereas like Ringling is on the other end of that spectrum, where like there's a very real world application to a lot of it.
No, I'm very glad to hear that. That's often the critique of certain art schools, is maybe there is a stigma around commercializing your art or commercializing your skills in a certain way, but it just seems practical that if you're spending the money to get those skills, that you intend to do it for many years as a career. And you know, that's probably one of the big values of a big institution like Ringling, is their connection to studios. And you know, I know a lot of people have gone through the character animation program, who they've got a great kind of pipeline to Disney and DreamWorks and Blue Sky
they're
and all
much
the
like
rest.
Recruiters.
Pretty much.
For Pixar.
Which is really good. I mean, that's why I feel like people go to those schools. Tell me a little bit about your involvement with Motionographer. How did that start, and what's your role been with the site?
It's funny. So I always tell this like little mini story, which like how it all began, and it's I guess like the takeaway is like, be nice to your producers. Whenever I was freelancing, I always made it a point to just talk to the producers, talk to everybody, just be nice to everybody. And whenever I would get emails, I would always follow up on the emails and just like let the producers know what I was doing, even if they didn't ask. So maybe that was kind of annoying to some of them. But one of the producers at Mass Market, her name was Liz. I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but I think it was like Shafano or Shafaro. So I apologize if Liz sees
Sorry,
this.
Liz.
She has a really cute dog. I think his name is Brigsby. But this is many years ago. So forgive
Hopefully
my...
Brigsby is still around.
Hopefully. But we had a rapport going, just reaching out for PSYOP and mass market bookings. And when I kind of jumped into the deep end and took on my first job for the New York Times, she reached out to book me, and I just really politely said, hey, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I'm taking on a job for the New York Times. And I just kind of like, kind of like just like confided in her that like, I don't know what I'm doing, wish me luck. And she was just like, oh, make sure to send it to me when it's done. So when I finished that first New York Times job, I sent it to Liz, and she then sent it to every person at PsyOp. So like I guess their company-wide email, she just like sent it to everybody. Yeah. And Justin Cohn was at PsyOp at the time, and he saw it, and then shortly after...
Was he a producer there?
He was a creative director of sorts, and he saw that, and then we ended up getting coffee, and he featured it on Motionographer shortly after. So like that was kind of the beginning of our rapport and just like our conversation, our relationship. Shortly after that, the next project I did, it was kind of a silly thing to do, but essentially the premise of the project was, can you work with clients with boundaries? So the premise was a small family-owned grass-fed beef company came to me for an explainer video. They didn't have much money, so what I experimented with them was, for $30,000 or whatever it was, you get revisions and all this crazy stuff, all this nonsense, or for like $10,000 or a fraction of what that is, I'll work with you on the script and up to the storyboard stage, and then after that, it's locked. Like I get full creative freedom to do that. So Justin really liked that idea, just this idea of like kind of giving options. It's like you can have the a la carte stuff, or here's the bargain basement thing. And the beauty of that was they got what they wanted, which is something they couldn't afford, and I got the creative freedom to explore something I wouldn't have gotten to explore otherwise. So he actually asked me to write an article about that. So that was like the first article I'd written for Motionographer, which was just exploring this idea of, is this possible? Like, yes, we're a service industry, but is there a way of establishing boundaries? So he invited me to write that article, which I did, and then shortly after, my responsibilities just kind of increased and increased, and leading up to, I guess, present day, which is now I'm kind of managing all of the content that comes in and out of the site.
I want to switch back to design education a little bit. You know, it's an interesting time where I feel like students have a lot of options. You can be at your house, you can learn online, you can do School of Motion, you can do a mentorship online like a MoGraph mentor, you can do a traditional art school, an art institute. Many community colleges now even have like various programs that are pretty good. A lot of high schools doing it. We're here launching Create Academy, some kind of hybrid model where we're going to use online resources but have more of a corporate setting. You know, you've been to the top of our industry working on really great stuff. If someone wants to shoot for the top, I don't mean just to do it and learn it, but to really shoot for the top, what do you think you need to go to a traditional art and design university? What would your advice be to that young student who, you know, might be on the fence?
That's a hard one because it's like none of it matters. At the end of it all matters and it doesn't matter as long as you get from point A to point B, and whichever your route there is. So I guess it's A to C. So
but when you got to that level, who did you see there? Were you sitting next to people who were like, oh yeah, I'm just self-taught? Or was it like, no, we all went to art universities?
I think most people that I've experienced do have a education of some degree. Like using Buck as an example, almost every person in the senior leadership has a BFA or more. There's actually quite a few people there with MFAs, which I was really impressed by. But again, it's also because at the time, like these are people that are like 35 plus. At the time, there was no other path to take. So I think it's like it's how do we get from like point A to point C, and point B is whatever it is that helps facilitate in the middle. And I think it's dependent on individuals, because I went to like the #2 best art school in the world, and it's also the second most expensive, but no one's ever asked me if I even went to school. But at the same time, if I had to do it again, I would re-enroll. Like if I had my selfish wish right now, I would move to London and enroll in the MA program at the Royal College of Art. Like if I could do anything, I would jump right back into academia. For me, it was like the greatest decision I've made, or one of the greatest decisions I've made. But that's from my experience. There's people, again, at Buck that don't have degrees. Nick Petley, he comes to mind. I think he has some college experience. I don't know. I don't believe he graduated, or I don't know to some degree, but he's working at Buck, and he's one of the best animators that they have in the LA office. So it's like, however you can get to like point C, like it doesn't really matter. The main thing is just like the work that you have, but then also I would say more than that is just the attitude. So whatever facilitates getting there, like, is great. And I think we probably will be seeing more and more people going unconventional routes, but you know, it's hard to say, because like the old guard, they came from a time when
that was the only
option. But now there's plenty of options. So it's like, I think that's a question that in 5 to 10 years it would be easier to answer, because now like almost everyone I've worked with has a degree, but like, what does that even matter? You know what I mean? Like, some of those people went to the greatest art schools there are. Some of them went to state schools and just did pottery and things like that. Like, and that's not like a slam on pottery. But, you know, I think it just varies based on whatever you need to facilitate change or learning or.
Okay, what about, so part of going to like Ringling is not that you're just learning a trade, you're also getting a liberal arts degree. It's umbrellaed in a liberal arts, you know, track. I mean, what about that side of it for you? Do you feel like that was invaluable? You had to study history, I don't know, philosophy, literature, whatever you had to do in and around that. I mean, how much has that affected you over time?
I think it has tremendously. Now, I can't really say off the top of my head, like, oh, thank God I took that.
I quote Hume every morning when I wake up.
Like, opened this door for me. But I think it's like, for me, I always view it as a foundation. So like, that was very much when I left Florida to go to Chicago, that was my first experience of jumping in the deep end and really committing to something. It was saying like, I'm leaving all of my family and friends behind. I have no help, like my family doesn't have deep pockets, like I'm on my own other than whatever help I'm getting from the government and like being with my wife. So like, that was my experience of saying like, this is worthy of the risk and investing in myself and diving into that. So like, that was a huge, like, that just being in the mindset to be able to do that makes things in a way more serious, and you're more like kind of committed to them, as opposed to something that's more ephemeral and you're just like, it's just a hobby.
How old were you when you went up to Chicago for that school?
I was older, so I was, I think, 22.
That was probably good. That was probably good to be a little older.
I would not have done it different. Like, I was a horrible college student, so like I graduated high school and went directly to community college, and all I'd want to do is ride BMX and go to punk shows and do that kind of thing. So like, I was a terrible student, and then when I got the ABC News job, I quit, and then like was working, and then that perspective was what helped me like be, I guess, like mature enough for the next step. But I think going back to it, it's I think that foundation and that maturity and that perspective that it gave me is invaluable. Now, like, I can't say like what the art history classes have really done directly, other than like expand like my horizons and what's out there. But I always like to look at it as it's something that I have forever.
So I mean, we talked about it a little bit, but in your own career of, you know, working on ads and commercials and you know, cool stuff for the New York Times, how did you feel as an artist? Did you feel like you were doing what you wanted to be doing when you're making some commercial for a product you may or may not care about? I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about this in our bubble of, you know, I don't know if artists are just too much snowflake of like, come on guys, get over it. Like, people need to sell things to each other. We have an economy, we need toilets and toilet paper and toothbrushes. Like, it's just part of a society, and we're lucky to even get to spend our time like helping people sell things to each other.
I think,
but then there's a feeling of dread of like, is the world falling apart and I'm over here focusing on things that are frivolous?
For me, I think most people can kind of attest that I'm pretty like overwhelmingly positive about this career and what it's given me. Like, I was just a typical Floridian with no future up until 18 years old. Oh gosh,
is that typical of a Floridian?
Well, I'm sorry. I guess I don't mean to throw all
people in Florida have no futures.
I grew up a very Floridian, at least in my community existence, where at 18 I had no prospects for the future, and if anyone were going to tell you if I would be successful to any degree or whatever, it would be a big question mark. So for me, this medium and this industry and the making ads has given me like, I've been able to live in like the 3 largest cities. I've been able to be able to support my family, and like so many things have happened. So I'm like overwhelmingly grateful and positive to it. But my view is that advertising and the ads themselves are byproduct of what I do, not the focus of what I do. And I guess like I don't want to like shoot myself in the foot with getting any great advertising jobs in the future, but I mean that in that I am I guess a fairly curious person. I genuinely like this stuff. I like making things, and by making these things, it then turns into an ad. But I'm not at it like going like, oh, like this, we're making this ad, we're selling this stuff. Like I don't even really think about it. I look at the design, and what I get to make. So the ad and it being a
that's probably where your head
commercial.
Should be.
Yeah,
let the marketers worry about
it's like,
strategy.
I don't want to say it's like a negative byproduct of what I like to do, but it's just a byproduct. It's like I get to support my family and make stupid little cartoons or whatever it is, and that's amazing. So,
but what about an ethical boundary? Things that you wouldn't. You have to have some sense of you're not going to propagandize things that are.
Yeah, like if like I got the.
If Trump calls you up, hey man, I need a badass ad.
I would say like.
We need to kick out all the Mexicans. Yes.
So
there's an ethical boundary, and I'm sure the studios you worked at would protect that mostly.
Yeah,
I would assume.
So most studios, I've actually luckily never been in that position.
Yeah.
I've actually I think the timing of when I was like coming of age professionally was a really good timing, because it was the advent of like less ads and more like branded content, for like lack of a better word, where it became all of these like stories and
cool
visual
film,
essays and
put our logo.
Like I've definitely had to make like Glade plugin commercials and stuff like that, but I've never like, I don't even think I've done a McDonald's ad. Oh wait, hold on. I'm trying to think. It all becomes a blur. I've done some like pretty like lame corporate jobs, but like for the most part, I've actually been really lucky. Like most of the things I've gotten to do are really cool, and most of the studios that I'm at will give you some freedom. So now, like if a studio is paying you as a freelancer and they pay you some high day rate and they lock you in, and then you say, oh no, I don't believe in like McDonald's, I don't want to work on that, but then you have to pay my kill fee. Like I imagine that would be like, I don't think that happens. I'm sure there would be resistance there, but I've definitely been at studios where people have opted out of jobs, and you know, like I'm sure the studio doesn't love it, but they find a way around it. I personally have, I guess, been kind of lucky. I mean, I've done like the Facebook and the Instagram and all those kind of like
those
things.
might be negative. Those might be detrimental. Yeah, I think that's a different conversation.
That's a whole, I think that's changing into becoming a very negative thing. But like at the time, it was like, oh, let's make this fun little characters like farting and whatever it is that they're doing.
You did a killer ad for Instagram. I think that was you.
Yep.
Very stop motion-y kind of.
Yeah, that was a really
was that at Buck?
Yeah, that was actually like my last big job at Buck. So that was a really wonderful experience where kind of the right place at the right time. So at the time, Buck had been doing some work for Instagram, and we were in direct contact with their head designer strategy guy. And he kind of gave us this open door where he said, we have X number of dollars. It wasn't even a big budget. It was like under $100,000. I think I don't know. Like I wasn't on those emails, but like it was a small budget. And he said, we have X number of dollars. If you can think of anything we should make, let us know. And like that was it.
We can think of something.
So what happened is it kind of died down. I ended up going on to some other jobs, and I had a week that was kind of slow. And the producer that I was working with on the previous Instagram job, I just didn't have much time. I said, Emily, let me put together a director's treatment for this job. They're rolling out the new logo, and they kind of gave us free reign to like do whatever. They just know, the only limitation was they wanted to go from old logo to new logo, and like however you can do that. So I put together a director's treatment. I did the writing. I worked with a guy named Rasmus Bach, who helped me with like the storyboarding, and we just put together a simple deck with like really not very much, like maybe a day's worth of actual creative work. There wasn't a single style frame, and there wasn't anything like that. It was just the writing for the idea. And we sent it to them, and they loved it. And then Rasmus and I got to go into a little room that's smaller than this, and it was just him and I, and we got to make everything from start to finish. And obviously, like we had a guy named John Paul Douglas, who was the director of photography, and we had some help with like the fabrication and compositing. But really, it was just him and I in a little room for 3 weeks, and we got to make this thing, and it was crazy. I can't speak to like, I don't know like all the numbers, but at the time when it came out, within less than like a week, it was the most viewed job Buck had ever done.
Wow.
And let me be very clear, it's by no means the best job that Buck has ever done.
Okay.
But since it was Instagram's new logo, the day that it launched, we were sitting there like Rasmus and I were just like giggling because we just kept refreshing the Instagram page, and it was accruing like 1 million views a minute. Like it was just like every minute it was just like millions.
This is like Instagram posted it on
Instagram posted it on their thing.
Oh gosh, only 1 billion people on that
so it
platform.
went on, and it just like, and it was on every blog post that they did about the new logo. It featured the video. And now like, obviously Buck and myself, like we don't ever get credited for that. It's the Instagram video. But that was kind of like that was like the perfect not end of that relationship, because I still like work with Buck from time to time and like I'm still good friends with them. But like that was the perfect way of like going out from that amazing
transitioning
experience.
to a new season.
So like so thank you, Ryan and Maury, for giving me that opportunity.
Surely they'll be watching this.
Yeah, exactly. The millionaires that like are I play at Buck are watching this. But like if they do see this, thank you very much. It was appreciated. But that was like, I couldn't have asked for a better experience, because it was like, it was just myself and Rasmus, and we just got to be in this little room for 3 weeks making something, and we bought all the stuff, we fabricated it all, and it was really fun.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. Thank you, Joe Donaldson, for coming in to Create Academy here, hanging out for a little bit. Hopefully the first of many, since you're here. I'll be hitting you up all the time. But yeah, I mean, best of luck with Holdframe. I'm definitely going to be, buying some of those files, taking a look. I know our students at MoGraph Mentor have been excited about seeing the various artists, and
that's great to hear.
Excited to see, continuing submissions and all the great pieces you're going to have up there, and then obviously just keeping up with Motionographer. And you're going to continue to do work with Motionographer?
Yeah, it's there's no like contracts or like ongoing thing. It's just kind of like an ongoing friendship, and right now like it's a healthy thing that I enjoy doing, and I'm definitely very honored to work on it. So it's something I don't really foresee ending it anytime soon. Like obviously like life changes. I just had my second kid, so it's very like you're always having to reassess. But as of right now, it's something I definitely I enjoy a lot.
Yeah. So very cool, man. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you
for coming in. Yeah. Thanks, bud. I'm gonna hit stop here.